You stare at your garden, proud of the massive, bush-like tomato plants taking over the space. They have thick green stems and leaves everywhere. But when you reach inside to find the actual tomatoes, there are barely any there. It is one of the most frustrating things in gardening, and it reveals a strange contradiction. The healthier and more beautiful your tomato plant looks, the less fruit it might actually produce. The solution to this problem isn't adding more fertilizer, pouring more water, or buying a bigger cage. The real secret is removing parts of the plant, and almost nobody teaches exactly why. For decades, traditional gardening wisdom has focused entirely on making plants grow as big as possible. But fixing this issue does not require expensive store-bought products or special tools. Instead, it just takes a bit of know-how. In this guide, you will learn exactly how to balance your plants for the best harvest. We will cover which specific types of tomato plants need pruning and which ones you should never prune heavily. You will discover exactly what parts to chop off, the perfect time to do it, and one clever late-season trick that dramatically speeds up how fast your tomatoes ripen on the vine. Let's start with the mistake that costs most gardeners half their harvest. To understand why this happens, you have to look at what a tomato plant actually wants to do. In nature, plants do not care about filling your kitchen basket with food. They naturally prioritize their own survival. To a tomato plant, survival means growing as many green leaves as possible to soak up sunlight. Because of this, a common trap is thinking that more branches will automatically mean more tomatoes. In reality, the exact opposite is true. When a plant is left to grow wild, its limited energy gets spread way too thin. Think of it like a kitchen trying to feed too many guests at once. Nobody gets a full meal. The plant spends all its fuel maintaining hundreds of useless leaves instead of growing juicy fruit. At the same time, all those extra branches create a serious hidden danger. When leaves are packed tightly together, they trap moisture and create high humidity inside the bush. Without fresh air blowing through the middle, disease quickly begins in these overcrowded spaces. Leaves stay wet, fungus grows, and the plant gets sick. By trying to let the plant grow as large as possible, you accidentally create the perfect environment for it to fail. In the end, the biggest tomato plants often become the least productive. Before you pick up your garden shears, you must learn the single most important rule of tomato growing. Not all tomato plants are the same, and treating them the exact same way is a recipe for disaster. Tomatoes are divided into two main categories based on how they grow: determinate and indeterminate. Knowing the difference changes everything. Think of determinate tomatoes like a bush that comes with a built-in plan. These plants grow to a certain fixed size, usually around 3 to 4 feet tall, and then stop. They naturally form a neat, compact shape. Because they have a set life cycle, they produce all of their fruit at roughly the exact same time. If you look at your seed packet and see words like bush or varieties like Roma, you are likely growing a determinate type. They are excellent for small spaces, but because they stop growing on their own, their fruit timing is short and sweet. Indeterminate tomatoes, on the other hand, behave like wild, climbing vines. They have no off switch. They will keep growing taller, spreading wider, and flowering until the first winter frost finally stops them. Because they never stop growing, they give you a steady, continuous harvest throughout the entire summer rather than one big rush. You can identify them by their long, sprawling branches that quickly outgrow standard cages, like popular cherry or beefsteak varieties. Pruning the wrong one can completely ruin your harvest before it even starts. Everything you do next depends on knowing which one you're growing. If you discovered that your plant is a determinate variety, your main goal is to use a gentle hand. Because these bush-type tomatoes only grow to a certain size, they have a limited number of branches. If you cut off too much, you're literally throwing away future food. The most common beginner mistake is getting too excited with the shears and hacking away at the top of the plant. Overpruning a determinate tomato permanently hurts your yields because the plant cannot regrow those lost limbs to make more fruit. Instead, you should only remove the very lowest suckers. Suckers are the tiny new branches that sprout right in the V-shaped space between the main stem and a leaf branch. Getting rid of just the lowest ones near the ground keeps mud from splashing up onto the leaves, which stops diseases from climbing up the plant. As you move up the plant, you must carefully protect the flower clusters. These yellow flowers are where your actual tomatoes will grow. Leave all the upper growth completely alone so the plant can form a thick canopy of leaves. This green top acts like a natural umbrella, shading the developing fruit from harsh afternoon sunburn. To recap this simple method, keep the bottom few inches of the stem completely clean for good airflow, but leave the rest of the bush alone to do its job. By protecting the flowers and avoiding heavy cutting, you ensure your bush stays healthy and packed with fruit. When it comes to indeterminate tomatoes, you can be much bolder with your garden shears. Because these vining plants never stop growing, you have to choose a strategy to control their shape, and it all comes down to managing the main stems or leaders. The simplest method is the single leader system, where you train the plant to grow up a single main stalk. This approach gives you the absolute largest fruit size and is incredibly easy to maintain, though your total number of tomatoes will be a bit lower. If you want a balance between ease of care and a bigger harvest, you can choose the double leader system. To do this, you let the very first strong sucker below your first flower cluster grow into a second main stem. For maximum production, a triple leader system allows one more sucker to develop. This gives you the highest total yield of tomatoes, but the individual fruits will be smaller, and the plant will require much more support and tied strings to keep it upright. No matter which system you choose, success requires a steady weekly pruning routine. Once every 7 days, take a slow walk through your garden to inspect your vines. Look closely at the V-shaped joints between the main stems and the branches. Snip off any new suckers while they are still small, about the size of a pencil or smaller, so the plant does not waste energy on them. By staying consistent each week, you keep the vine focused on pumping nutrients straight into your developing fruit rather than growing a messy jungle of leaves. Pruning is not just about where you cut. It is also about how and when you do it. Healthy habits prevent disease before it ever gets a foothold in your garden. First, always prune in the morning. This gives the open cuts a full day of warm sunlight to dry out and heal before the damp night arrives. Never prune during wet weather, because water carries bacteria right into the fresh wounds. You must also keep your shears clean. Wipe them down with rubbing alcohol before moving from one plant to the next, acting just like a doctor sanitizing tools between patients so you do not spread sickness. As the plant grows, continue to remove the lower leaves that sit close to the soil. This opens up clear space for excellent air circulation, which keeps the whole garden dry and healthy. The biggest mistakes happen when you wait too long to care for your plants. A common error is leaving giant suckers on the vine until they are thick like tree branches. Cutting these large stems creates huge wounds that take a long time to heal, leaving the plant open to infection. Another painful blunder is accidentally cutting off your prized flower clusters because you were rushing and did not look closely at what you were snipping. By making pruning a quick, clean, and timely morning habit, you protect your hard work and keep your garden thriving. As the summer days grow shorter, you will face a new race against time. Your plants will still be covered in hard green tomatoes, and the first winter frost will be just a few weeks away. This is the perfect moment to use a forgotten, advanced trick called topping your plants. About 4 weeks before the first expected frost, take your shears and cut off the very top of the main growing stems. This might feel a bit strange, but it sends a powerful message to the tomato plant. By removing the growing tips, you stop the plant from wasting time on new leaves or tiny flowers that will never have time to mature anyway. Instead, it redirects all its remaining energy straight into the fruit that is already hanging on the branches. This results in much faster ripening, turning those hard green balls into juicy red tomatoes just in time for a bigger final harvest. As a special bonus, you can actually use your pruning habits to get completely free plants earlier in the season. When you snip off healthy, medium-sized suckers, do not throw them in the compost pile. Instead, place the cut end into a jar of clean water on a sunny windowsill. In just a few days, you will see tiny white roots sprouting from the bottom of the stem. Once these roots grow about an inch long, you can plant the sucker directly into the soil. This creates a whole new, identical tomato plant for free, giving you an even bigger supply of fresh garden food. It is easy to get overwhelmed by all the modern gardening gadgets, fancy sprays, and complicated advice available today. But when you look closely at these old pruning methods, you realize something special. Traditional gardeners did not have labs or computers, but they learned exactly what worked simply by watching their plants change day after day, season after season. Today, science and modern gardening recommendations align perfectly with those exact same time-tested practices. The secret to their success is not magic. It comes down to 4 very simple, natural principles: maximizing sunlight, improving airflow, managing energy allocation, and focusing on disease prevention. When you open up the middle of a plant, you let the sun warm the fruit and the wind dry the leaves. When you snip off useless suckers, you force the roots to send food straight to the tomatoes instead of spreading it too thin across a wild jungle of green leaves. By keeping the lower branches clean, you stop deadly soil diseases from climbing up the main stem. You do not need an expensive degree or a garage full of products to grow the best tomatoes on the block. You just need to work alongside nature instead of fighting against it. Sometimes the oldest garden habits survive because they solve real problems, not because they're mysterious. By mastering these basic steps, you are taking control of your garden and setting yourself up for an incredible harvest year after year. Now that you have the secret to a massive harvest, it is time to put this knowledge into action with the quick 10-minute tomato challenge. You do not need to spend hours working in the sun to see a massive difference in your garden. Today, grab your garden shears and complete this simple checklist. First, walk out to your garden and identify your tomato type, so you know exactly how the plant grows. Second, remove the correct suckers based on whether your plant is a bush or a vine. Third, snip off any leaves that are touching the soil to protect the plant from dirt-borne diseases. Fourth, always clean your pruning tools with rubbing alcohol so you keep things sterile. Finally, pick a specific day of the week to start your regular weekly inspections. By taking just a few minutes to complete these basic steps, you will instantly set your garden up for success and help your plants focus their energy where it matters most. I want to hear about what is growing in your garden right now. Are you growing determinate or indeterminate tomatoes this year? Leave a comment below and share your favorite heirloom varieties. Tell me about the biggest tomato you have ever grown, or share your own pruning experiences. In the next video, I'll show you the forgotten watering habit that can make tomatoes sweeter, reduce cracking, and cut watering time almost in half.